I'm Rick Lewis with Phenon Hoop Report. On today's segment of Coach's Corner, I have Coach Rob Perron of Catawba College. Welcome, Coach.
Thanks, Rick.
Coach, at 47 years of age, you've been coaching for 25 years. That's a nice, long history of a coaching resume.
Yeah. Well, I still want to think I'm young. I may have some gray hair from bad help side defense or something, but I was very blessed to get into the game that I love, right out of college. And not a lot of people get to get the experience I did at a young age and really have more energy and passion now than I've ever had. And I think, in a fun way that these guys keep you young. And the game evolves, of course, but I've just really and truly enjoyed being around basketball. It's basketball. Division I, Division II, Division III. Obviously, everybody has the level that they want to coach at, but I still think if you're in the gym, it's like being on the golf course. You should probably be pretty happy.
Right.
And so I count my blessings every day, and I know, and sometimes in coaching profession, you do 70% of the work to do the 30% of the work that you like to do. But I just enjoy, the relationships with the guys as much as anything, and then obviously working towards a common goal.
Now, Coach, you were born and raised in Minnesota, and you were a pretty good high school player, and you had a chance to play Division II basketball at St. Andrews, which is in Laurinburg, North Carolina. Talk about the transition going from a high school player to the Division II level, and also the distance that was involved.
Yeah. Well, I think, you speak to the distance first, and the hardest part was playing away from family. I'm a family guy. And so you go from having your friends and your family see every game but 2 games to seeing 2 games a year. Today's a little bit better with the, streaming and all that stuff. But when I was young, they didn't have a ton of that stuff. So that was the toughest part, just being away from family. But obviously the region that I was fortunate enough to play in, North Carolina college basketball, is second to none. I'm not going to argue with anybody on that. I don't, maybe better high school basketball in Indiana or whatever, but North Carolina college basketball from the high level to the low levels is very good and exciting. But I was probably like a lot of other kids. I probably thought I was a Division I player, and then I got to Division II, and I was humbled pretty quickly. I had a fairly successful career, but like you don't realize how good this level is, and then moving outside of my region, I just was a whole other world of how talented the basketball world is.
Well, Coach, being from Minnesota, let's give everybody sort of a history lesson.
Sure.
A lot of people don't realize that the Los Angeles Lakers
is
from Minneapolis, and the reason for the Lakers is
the land of 10,000 lakes. So you see it on every license plate for Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, and that's why the Minneapolis Lakers are the Lakers. They kept the Lakers name, and whoever let the Lakers get away from Minnesota should be punished or put in jail. But they've done pretty well. They've done pretty well in Los Angeles, and I'm hoping the Timberwolves get back to Kevin Garnett heydays. But it was a great place to grow up. It's an unbelievable region and good people up there, and I really enjoyed my time there. But I feel like really North Carolina is just as much a home as Minnesota is.
You played at St. Andrews, and you said it humbled you very quickly. The competition at the Division II level is quite good. Right. And that's the one thing that most people have the misconception about is it's D1 or bust. But tell a lot of the young prospects today the difference between D1, D2, and also the similarities.
Yeah, I said earlier, basketball is basketball. And obviously, probably at the Division I level, the bigs are bigger. But I don't think there's, that huge of a disparity. I think a lot of people, when they play Division II, they kind of have I say they're PhD, they're poor, hungry, and driven, and kind of a chip on their shoulder. And so one thing I've learned from Coach Lutz is, we respect all, but we fear none. And so, obviously you're going to have more resources, and it's going to be easier to lure people to Division I. But I tell kids, often that makes you happy on that tweet when you announce where you're going. but that's not what's going to equal 4 or 40 years of happiness.
Right.
Once that tweet's out, what I'm saying, like understand, I think, a chance to play, a chance to win, a chance to get a good degree, a chance to grow as a player, and most at Division II level, most schools have between 8 and 10 scholarships. So, at Division I, they've got 13. So, when you put a scholarship in a guy at the Division II level, you need him to produce. And so there's kind of a positive pressure to produce. So I think there's a little bit of misconception about how good of a time you can have at Division II. Maybe the amenities, and all that stuff might be a little bit different or a little bit bigger stage. But, we try to give our guys that experience at this level too. And then, at the end of the day, I think people undervalue the relationships. Did you have a winning experience? Did you get to play? Were you part of something bigger than you? I think those things are often put to the side until you get there, and they should be put in the forefront before you make a decision where you go.
And I agree with you, Coach. I think, the difference is the bigs are bigger, but when you take the bigs out of the equation, it's just as athletic. And more importantly, the division that you're in at Catawba, the fan base is pretty intense. Yeah. And the rivalries are intense. And if you can make a comparison between go to a Division II game at Catawba and the teams that you're playing and seeing the fan support, go to some lower tier D1 schools that have no more than 200 or 300 people in the stands.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people build their gyms too big, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? And we were in a NCAA tournament regional game, not this year because it got canceled, of course, but last year, and you could barely hear yourself think. And I think, that's really important. You can only generate so many of those atmospheres. We do a school day game where, kids are out of session, our college kids, referring to them. And so what we do, the elementary kids are still in school. And you've seen a lot of women's programs do this, but we invite all the kids to play, come during the day. And it's a pretty electric atmosphere. Yeah, and so, I think we try to do as many of those things we can. But, still the difference to me is, we've played a lot of those teams in exhibitions and scrimmages and beat Division I in scrimmages. And we were down to Wichita State, by 2 points with 4:30 to go. So, I think there's, and it may be the biggest game for our guys and maybe the lowest game on their schedule for those players, but I still think, there's a lot more parity than people realize.
Now, in 1996, you graduated from St. Andrews, and immediately you became a volunteer assistant there. I guess early on, you decided you would want to become a college coach right away. Yeah,
and I played I was very fortunate. I played for Ron Levency Sr., God rest his soul, at a junior college, and then I came down and played at St. Andrews for Ron Levency, who's now the head coach at Barton, who's won a national championship there. And him and Coach Peeler, who's now, I think, the VP at Erskine, who was a coach as well. Those two, gave me an opportunity to get in, and they told me they thought I would, have a good chance as a coach. And I just really was a sponge about that experience. It wasn't like going to work, regardless of not getting paid or whatever. You do all kinds of side jobs, umpiring baseball games and, running the facility or doing side stuff. But it wasn't like work, and it's still not. I would do it for less, to be honest. Don't tell my athletic director that, but I would still coach for less money. I think if you're into coaching for the money, then you probably should get out, to be honest. I mean, I think you should be into it for the people.
Well, after your first year as a volunteer, you became an assistant coach. It's very tough getting involved at the collegiate level, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so many people ask you, you get an email a day about how do I become a college basketball coach? And I would say the best path is it could be different for a lot of different people. I grew up the son of an umpire, and walking out to the park every day, but I volunteered. And I think so many people think that being a GA at a high major is the only way to do it. And I think that's a great route. But to be honest with you, when you volunteer to Division II, you get to do probably more things that you would like to do and still do the do the laundry and all those things. But I think you get to do more like recruiting type stuff, game plan stuff, because there's more labor needed. So I wouldn't tell people to look down on taking a Division II or Division III assistant job, and it might actually even be better for the net worth of the grant experience versus just a GA or a manager thing at a Division I. And that works for a lot of people, and it gets you plugged in, and people get to see you work. But the box that you work in at that level may be a little bit smaller than the box that you work in at a Division II or Division III level.
I think you raised a good point there as far as being an assistant coach, whether it's a D2 or D3 level, get that experience, because a lot of times you can be a video coordinator or a director of basketball operations at a certain Division I level, but you're sort of being boxed in as in that capacity. And when you do apply for a new job, which is very difficult to do, everybody's going to ask, what kind of experience do you have?
Yeah, you're right on point. Like, and I would say, a lot of guys that I've met were D2 volunteers on the road recruiting, and you can't do that, and so like we used to, when I first got in, coach would say, here's $300 for the summer. And you kind of take a step back of how you're going to make that for recruiting. And, so you immediately call your friends, are you going to be at this place? Can I stay at your place? But the thing was, you'd meet 5 times the people in one event than you would maybe being back at base at a high major, doing whatever you do there. So I think again, it's how you look at it. There's advantages to both, obviously, but I think it's, taking whatever canvas you have and making the most out of it.
Well, the college profession is a very fluid business and industry, and you have to move around quite a bit. In 1996, when you were at St. Andrews, you left to take an assistant job at Pfeiffer College in Meisenheimer. And so you're going from one small rural community to another one, but that's some of the steps that you have to take to get where you want to go.
Yeah. And I spent 3 years at St. Andrews, and what happened there was Coach Peeler was our head coach. He took over for Coach Levency, who went to Barton. And then Coach Peeler got the head job at Erskine. So I'm, a young guy and thought I was going to get the head job, right then and there, but I went to Pfeiffer, which was the best decision that ever. It's funny how the basketball gods take care of you. I just met a whole new network of people that kind of plugged me into where I'm at today. So, sometimes you think, well, why is this happening to me? We did well. We turned St. Andrews around, and now I didn't really have a position. But, working for my brother Dave at Pfeiffer at the time, we had a really good team, and that was the best thing, one of the best things that ever happened to me. And it was a great experience at St. Andrews and great experience at Pfeiffer. And then St. Andrews called me back to be the head coach. And so, like, I've always felt like wherever you're planted, to make it better than it was before, and try to make decisions that way in the best interest of the people around you, and know that you're always going to do that, and karma or good luck or calls come back your way when you least expect it, or sometimes when you need it most. And so that's just kind of always been my philosophy, instead of always looking for the next job. Really, a lot of the jobs I've got, people kind of called me and said, would you be interested? And so that's kind of always been my approach, is just do the best darn job you can at where you're at.
Well, you spent 3 years at St. Andrews as assistant coach, and you spent another 3 years at Pfeiffer as an assistant coach. And then you had the opportunity at the age of 26 to become the head coach back at St. Andrews. What did it mean to you to go from being an assistant coach to being a head coach at the Division II level?
Yeah, I was actually, I think 28 or 29, but I was blessed, and I'll be really honest. At the time, St. Andrews was in a tough spot, financially, and they went from first back to worst in the league. And I think part of that was I was there when they were doing well, and got some tax credit for that. And that there was a lot of people that were involved with that: Coach Levency, Coach Peeler, myself, and obviously the players. But just a great opportunity for me. And I think coaches look at opportunities. It's not, great situation, may look down upon it, but they don't realize how few opportunities there are. And when I got to St. Andrews, they took full scholarships away after my first year, but I don't regret making that decision to go there because it was a really, really good decision. And I got great experience. You move over one chair and you have to make all those decisions in real time. And it's really easy to sit in the second chair and be an armchair quarterback. But when you're in that first chair, you got to make decisions in real time. And I really enjoyed my experience there. And we got better. And it was a tough situation, but I think sometimes that seasons you as a coach because not every season is going to be perfect for him. And sometimes it's good to go through some tough stuff. And so I absolutely cherish that experience, and it's a great place to go to school. And it's kind of funny you choose the school because of the basketball program, but what makes it really accentuate for you is the opportunity to work and get exposure and all those things. And that was really valuable to me.
Well, sometimes in life we have to take one step forward and two steps backwards.
Right.
And now when you're a head coach at St. Andrews and the things deteriorated there, then you had the opportunity to go back to Pfeiffer as an assistant coach.
Right.
So I'm sure like anybody else, you're a head coach. Now you got to go back and take another step back
Right.
and be an assistant coach. But that's all part of the process and the journey of being a collegiate coach.
Yeah. One thing, the people that really know me, Rick, is I have absolutely no ego.
Right.
I'm really competitive, If you can call that an ego, forgive me. But at the same time, I don't, if you're an assistant, you put on your same pants as the way you do as a head coach.
Right.
And so to me, that wasn't, a huge step back. Working for Dave, it was like more like working for your brother, and we worked hard and he pushed us. But I'm just, for all the assistants out there, your job is just as important as the head coach. And I've spent, I don't know, 10 years as the head coach now, or 9 or 10 years and 15 years as an assistant. And I value both experiences very, very well. I mean, very much. And to me, I think being a head coach is a great goal, but don't underestimate the part about being an assistant. To be honest with you, when you're an assistant, you get to spend more time with the players often. And that is really, I enjoy that part as much as anything. Like that's one part I don't like about being the head coach is sometimes you don't get to spend as much time with them as you want to. And so be careful what you wish for, because I think being an assistant is a great thing.
Well, in 2006, you had the opportunity to be the director of basketball operations at UNC Charlotte under Bobby Lutz, and that's where I got to know you on a personal level. What was it like working for Coach Lutz? So the winningest coach in UNC Charlotte history.
He could be one of the most underrated coaches in the country.
I agree.
Think about what he did at Charlotte, and I'll turn it back a couple years, but in that league was Bob Huggins in his prime, Rick Pitino in his prime, Tom Crean was at Marquette. Soderbergh was at, I do believe, St. Louis. Just an unbelievable game. Calipari was at Memphis, and he was winning as many games as anybody in that league. And it basically was Conference USA, which turned into the Big East. Basically 90% of those teams went to the Big East, the top end of those teams. And he was winning Conference USA championships and, probably one of the best X and O coaches I've ever seen. And I think the thing that people don't realize about him is he had incredible range, meaning he could coach kids from every different background and personality. And I think as head coaches and coaches across the country, I don't think that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses is they can only coach a certain type of person. And I thought, he had just a great ability to coach a great range of players from all, areas, whether it be a transfer or a JUCO kid or a high school kid or from Oregon or from North Carolina. I think he really understood that as well as anybody.
Wasn't the league originally called the Metro because you had Charlotte, Louisville, Cincinnati, Houston, Memphis, and Marquette?
Yeah, I do believe so, and that was before my time there.
Yeah.
That might have been Maxwell's days when they went to the Final Four. I don't know if that was Metro Conference or not at that time. But, I used to do scheduling when I was there at the end, and I used to be able to play the. I could tell you every conference that every team was in at Division I from a scheduling standpoint. I couldn't do that right now because they've changed so much. People are moving around. It feels like every year, even at our level, we've got a new team in our league this year, Limestone, and I just feel like there's so like globalization of even basketball within our own country. People are changing leagues all the time. And so, but yeah, that was, it's fun. They went from the Metro, Conference USA, A10, and then they went back to Conference USA, and that was probably a football decision when they added football.
Right.
So like, it's funny to see how schools evolve with all the different elements going on. And that's, that really isn't changing with the whole BCS thing. And, it's just, it's crazy how often teams move around nowadays.
Well, we have a special bond. My son Colby attended Charlotte as an invited walk-on, and he earned a scholarship his sophomore year. So you got to know him a little bit. And, the one thing about Colby is he loves Charlotte. Charlotte's a special place. And if you ask him what his dream job would be, it would be, I'd love to be able to coach at Charlotte one day. Talk about your relationship with Colby and what your dream job would be.
Yeah. First, Colby was just first class. He was an incredible student, an incredible person, incredible shooter, incredible work ethic. And as a coach, you always want to have kids which you're going to get out of them. And some guys, you don't know what you're going to get Monday and different Tuesday, or whatever. And with Colby, you knew what you're going to get every day out of him. And that there was going to be just little incremental improvements over the course of time. And that was how I remember him. He was just so darn reliable, and absolutely no maintenance, and always added to your team camaraderie. And I tell you what, it's good to have a shooter on the scout team. Say he can simulate the best of the shooters, and so like I just really enjoyed my time with him, along with all the other players at Charlotte. But that was really really neat. What was your set? Did you have a second question? I can't remember what that was.
What was your dream job?
Yeah, my dream job's always the one I'm at, and but I would honestly say like Charlotte was my Duke or Carolina. You know what I'm saying? My wife spent most of her life in Charlotte, so that that's easy for her. And happy wife is a happy life. But I really enjoyed my time there, and we had some. We beat Steph Curry when the year they went to the Elite Eight, and Jeff Teague when he was at Wake Forest, and Clemson when they were ranked, and Mississippi State, and Xavier when they were ranked, and we beat Rick Pitino, handed them their biggest loss in the old arena. So like I've had some really neat, part of some really neat games there, and I was along for the ride. I didn't have as much to do with it as those other guys did, but I really enjoyed that experience. And I think Coach Sanchez does an incredible job there, and we'll get them back on their feet. Made a nice little jump, I think, this year in the league, and I think that'll only continue to trend that way for them.
Well, since you enjoyed working with Colby at Charlotte, starting July 1st, Colby will be with Phenom Hoop Report, so you'll get a chance to work with him once again.
Good. Well, that's. We expect them to tell us about all the best players throughout the three-state area for sure.
Yeah, we're excited about having them. After your stint at Charlotte, you became an assistant coach at Newberry College, another Division II school.
Right.
And talk about, as an assistant coach, the process as far as recruiting is concerned, as far as what players you recruit and how you go about the recruiting process.
Right. Well, I think each situation is a little bit different. I think each school may have a good personality fit as a head coach, but they also probably have a good prospect fit. And you got to know what makes each kid tick, so to speak. And I think you got to be honest with yourself. Well, is it possible for a kid to be happy at your place in today's transfer generation? So I think number one, obviously you got to have a certain level of talent. I think that's important. And then, number two, part of my equation is is this kid a stick to it guy and gonna stick with it, and about process, and we say SOS, squad over self. There's got to be some element of that. You've got to be a guy that I want you to have individual goals, and we've been very fortunate to put some kids overseas professionally, and I want that to be your goal. But you still have to be there's kind of a collective sacrifice with trying to win, and I want guys that are part of that, and a lot of the guys that we get are just based on relationship. We work over the course of time, and we try to spend more time on the phone with them. Obviously we're texting them and stuff of that nature too, but I think it's important to kind of just really get to know the people that you're recruiting.
Now, you became the head coach at Catawba, and you've developed a great reputation and a really strong program there. And you said, like, when you were a D2 player, you got humbled pretty quickly. So
Sure.
I would imagine the experience that you had as a player, you can relate when you're out recruiting players who have that D1 or bust mentality.
Sure. Yeah. And I respect it. The fact that you want to go D1, I'm not going to hold that against anybody, but I tell them that I'm not going to go away. And to be honest with you, several of our guys, like Daquan Lilly, who was an incredibly efficient, great player for us. We were the first one to offer him out of high school. And then the Division I's sent him to JUCO as a qualifier, saying they'll recruit him. And then he got hurt, and we stuck by him.
Right.
Ben Zamonik's the guy that chose LR, played for Ryan. And then Ryan left, and he bounced back to us. So a lot of the guys we have are guys that we have long-standing relationships with. But yeah, just being able, obviously to be able to tell my story. And when I was, in JUCO ball, all I wanted to hear was Division I. And then I, my dad kind of sat me down and said, "Listen, these guys have been calling you, and if he wouldn't have given me that, I ended up being the head coach of where I played." And so I think, the people that want you the most are often the best fit for you, not somebody that comes in and is a 7-day recruit, because their third choice didn't take a scholarship.
Right.
I don't know if that's setting you up for success or failure or somewhere in between, but I think it's important to really do a deep dive in whatever choice you make.
Well, Catawba's in the South Atlantic Conference, which is in the D2, but it's sort of like, if you make a comparison, the teams in the SAC is equivalent to the ACC, because you're talking about day in, day out. You got to play against Lincoln Memorial, Queens, LR, Newberry, Mars Hill, Wingate, just to name a few.
Right.
Talk about how tough your conference is.
Yeah, there's no real off nights, and this is no disrespect to the other D2 teams in our region. I think we're like 15-4 in the last 5 years against our league against the other two leagues in our region, and I think that in national tournament play, not regular season, but a national tournament play when you got best on best, so to speak, and I think that says a lot for our league. It's very, very deep. There's a lot of schools that are, Queens and LMU don't have football, so they're going to stick more resources into basketball and stuff of that nature, and that's fine. And I think competition makes you better. I want to play with good people. I think that drives me to work harder. But yeah, I think there's I told one coach this year before our conference tournament, I felt like there was 6 teams that could win it, even though Lincoln Memorial was 32-1 or whatever they were. I felt like there's 5 or 6 teams that could win the conference tournament.
Well, Coach, last year y'all finished third in the conference. Talk about your expectations and goals for this upcoming season.
Yeah. Our goals never change. There's 3 things I kind of like. We always want to be in the national tournament. And I think if you're in the top 3 in our league, that's gonna happen in 9 out of 10 years. But our gold standard is to hang a new banner, and that's a national championship. And I don't think I'll never be content. I think that breeds mediocrity. But we will. We've lost, I think, 13 guys to graduation in the last 2 years, 6,000 point scores. So we may look more like an expansion team with a number of new guys, but we got some good pieces coming back. Terrence Whitfield was all tournament team, and just kind of, he's really been a starter, but hasn't started a lot of games for us. And then, you know, we've got a couple other returns that are pretty good. And then we've got a group of new guys that, you know, will be competitive. And I think we'll go through a little bit of a learning curve, but they're hungry and they understand that, you know, it's about the name on the front, not the name on the back. And we'll get things going. But, you know, I really feel like we have a chance to be pretty good. But I do feel like our learning curve is going to have to be quick because we have so many new guys, and it's kind of been a different thing with the COVID world. You know, you're having a lot more phone conversations and getting a lot more creative than you ever had to do.
Coach, you spent 25 years coaching at the age of 47. Along the way, you've been with a lot of different coaches. Who's had the biggest impact on your coaching philosophy today?
I mean, I would say Coach, probably Coach Lutz and Coach Davis in different ways, and they kind of come from the same family. I would give a lot of credit to my family, to be really honest. My family, my wife and my kids, but also my father and mother, and they've you know, taught me how to treat people. And I think that's been really, really important, you know, as far as X and O and basketball coaching philosophy. I always tell people, take the good out of every person you know and put it inside of you. And so, like, I take a lot from a lot of people. I think a lot of good material is stolen, and I'm not just talking, you know, X and O's, but I just think, you know, personality traits. So I'm constantly trying to harvest the good in every person I meet and just try to make it a part of me. And, you know, like I've had a lot of coaches tell me, you know, treat coaches well when they don't have players, because they will have players later on, you know, and like it's always kind of the thing that stuck with me. I've learned a lot from high school coaches, to be honest. I've had some incredibly good high school coaches at my team camp that I'll sit down and pick their brain, you know, that has been tremendously influential to me. And I think they do a really good job. And sometimes a high school coach has got to make a pair of nines beat a full house, and I think, you know, that takes a special skill. And so there's a lot of good coaches out there, and I think the key is to just kind of take the best from each of them.
As a D2 program, do you ever try to schedule games during the regular season against D1 teams, and how difficult is it?
Yeah, we'll play a D1 anytime, anywhere if we can get one. I've been blessed, you know. I've had a really good coaching tree, and we've played Maryland, and Mark and Nima were both there, of course, that you know, and we played Coach Keats at UNC Wilmington his first game, and my first year when we were picked 11th out of 12 when I got to Catawba, it was a lot easier to get those games. Radford's played us a couple times, and that's been a great experience for us. We played them really tight one time and got the brakes beat off us the other time. But I, you know, we'll try to do that as much as we can. Obviously, we played Wichita State, and that was Coach Wall, one of my assistants, really got that done, and that was a great thing. And so we'll try to play as many of those games as we can, and just, you know, to those guys, like, that really is something our guys really look forward to, and they appreciate that. And I would tell every Division I coach that played us, it helped us so much, just from a experience standpoint and good competition and all the things that come along with that. So, you know, anytime we get one of those games, we're going to try to shift whatever we got to do around to play it, no matter when they offer to play. So even in the scrimmage, we scrimmaged, you know, 2 Division I's last year, and it was just an unbelievable experience that made us better.
For the people who haven't seen Catawba play, how would you describe a Rob Perron coach team?
Sure. I'm not one of those guys that thinks that we have to play the same way every year. I think your players aren't the same every year, so you're gonna need to. I think as a coach, if you can't adapt a little bit, you're probably gonna struggle. And it's not saying that fundamental things aren't important. I'm not talking about that at all. That's really important. You have some core things to do, but hopefully with our teams, you know, last year I think we were second in offense and second in defense in the league, and we did not play nearly as well on defense this year. But I think we're going to be a team that plays a little bit higher possession game. We're going to I really try to have players that can play more than one position. I'm a really big fan of length at all positions when it can be provided. But I think we want to attack on offense and we want to attack on defense. I would say I probably, sometimes to a fault, but I think also to a strength. Sometimes we give our guys a little bit more freedom than maybe some other people. And I'm a firm believer that I don't think kids can reach their max potential if they're not given a little bit of decision-making power, so to speak. So we try to, and obviously you have to reel them back in at times, but try to get kids to play to their strength, and then still understand that there's right plays to make and that collective sacrifice that we talked about a little bit earlier.
Well, being located in North Carolina in the hoop state, there's a lot of talent.
Yeah.
Every level. What's your sales pitch for young prospects that want to come to Catawba?
Yeah. Well, we tell them all roads lead to Catawba. No, we're in a great location. I think we're close to a lot of places. And we have a good little buzz on campus and atmosphere, and obviously being to the NCAA tournament the last 2 years. And so we've got some momentum. We've got good atmosphere. I haven't had one top 10 player transfer in my 6 years. I've had one that graduated early. So I think we've done right by the kids that have been here. Did a really good job of graduating people. And so I think that my sell to Catawba is it's holistic. I think we have a good chance to help you play overseas, a good chance to, establish a real relationship. I'm really proud. I was going through we were renovating our offices, and I was pulling down my team pictures from the last 6 years, and I was looking, and I think I've had everybody back to a game the last 2 years except for one international and one other kid, and that means a lot to me. I just didn't, I didn't really sit down and think about that, but to have, those guys come back at some point and stay invested in the program makes me believe that, number one, they had good teammates and they had some good experience with their coaching staff or the school. So those are, my approach and my sell to Catawba is obviously we've been pretty successful. We still want to reach new heights, but at the same time, I think we've done a really good job of, establishing relationship, graduating kids, getting good internships, whatever it may be. Like, it's really a holistic approach with us, where I think a lot of people don't talk about that enough. The other outside of basketball stuff.
Now, did I hear you correctly? As far as in the past 10 years, you haven't had anybody that left or transferred?
No, my top 10 player minute guys in the last 6 years of my years at Catawba, nobody's left. We've had one kid that left illness wise, but didn't transfer to another school. So, guys that were our top 10 minute getters, they've all coming back to school. And I think in today's transfer world, where and I'll be honest with you, and this is nothing against some coaches. Everybody has a different way, but I think some coaches would be like, hey, survival of the fittest. Darwin, we'll let them play, and the guy that doesn't get it, we'll just get rid of him. And I try not to start with that premise. I really try to start with what's this 4-year plan? Or if the guy's got 2 years left, if he's a transfer, what's the 2-year plan? Like, I think some guys just, and I get it. I really do. I mean, that maybe there's, it's win or bust. But I try not to take that approach. We've had some guys transfer, but not many, but nobody really that's been in the top 10 as far as minute getters is left. And we haven't had many transfers. Maybe some walk-ons and stuff of that nature. But I think that says something about the guys that I've recruited as assistants. I think that says something about the team of camaraderie and their experience as basketball players.
We're talking about transfers, but the one thing that you guys also do as far as in recruiting, you get a lot of players that have played at the Division I level that transferred to the D2 level.
Sure. Yeah, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, we had 7 kids, and I'm going to specify 3 categories, that have had a Division I offer and it was pulled, played at a Division I, or actually chose us over a Division I. and so most of them are in the first two categories. But I think that's just part of today's world. I'm going to be honest with you. I'd rather have a high school kid, but I'm not afraid of transfers. We just the interview portion of the pageant is pretty important to us, and we're going to make sure we get to know those guys. But we've done a good job with some transfers, and we've done a really good job with some high school guys. So I believe that you need to have a mix. I think maybe we have 5 high school guys and 3 transfers, I think, in this class right now. But I'm not set on doing just one or the other. I don't think I think the formula, changes each year depending on what you need and how people fit in.
How has recruiting changed in the last 10 years?
Well, you've probably heard this 100 times, but people say you got to recruit your own team, over every year, and we've kind of that's kind of taken care of itself. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of not having to do that, but I definitely think because of the volume of transfers, you're just going to end up with more transfers just based on the percentages. I don't know how many Division I kids have left this year, but if you really think, if you have 300 schools and there's 4 scholarships open per school, that's only 1,200 scholarships nationwide. And then you got Division I transfers and prep schools and JUCOs and internationals. Like, to get a Division I or Division II scholarship is an honor. So I think, I think it's important to kind of still stay in your roots with your high school guys, but I think you're going to have to dabble in the transfer market just based on the way it's working right now. And that often just the market often dictates the way it goes.
But you mentioned something earlier that stuck with me. You said that one of the keys as far as coaching is the relationships that you have built. Right. And I would imagine during the recruiting process that the relationships you build with the recruits over a long period of time is really advantageous.
Yeah. And again, a lot of the transfers we get have been a guy that I recruited before,
right,
or my former assistants recruited before, or my assistant coach before. So like I think that often happens. So we're not often getting what I call a cold transfer. Right. We often get a transfer that we have a relationship with. So
it's safe to say, don't burn any bridges with any recruits.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, and we tell kids that when we had a kid choose Division I the other day over us or whatever, and I just feel like don't forget about us. It's not going to change how I feel about you, and just kind of leave it at that. I think a lot of people they get bitter instead of better. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think you just got to keep working on getting better instead of getting bitter.
Well, Coach, I've known you for a long time, and I know you've been in the coaching profession for 25 years. You're still very young at 47. Yeah. The one thing that I've admired about you more than anything else is how humble you are as a person. And I think the things that you said throughout the course of the interview, as far as, the reason why you got into coaching, and it wasn't always about wins and losses, whether you was an assistant coach or a head coach, you did it because you enjoyed it and you loved it. And I think that really spoke volume.
And I can say the same about you, Rick. I think you do great work for the kids and trying to put them in front of, as much exposure as they can, but at the same time, tell the stories about, you're not a failure because you're going Division II or Division III for that matter. I think you beat that drum in several of your venues and on the internet and stuff, and I can appreciate that. And I'm not just speaking from a D2 guy, because I absolutely enjoyed my days as a Division I guy. And but I think if we're not doing it for the right reasons, there's too many people that want to do it for the right reasons, and I can appreciate your just general care for student athletes.
Well, the other thing too, in closing, Coach, it's, the 4 years you have with a player, at Catawba, you're preparing that young man for the next 40 years of his life. And that's the most important thing, and the relationships you built along the way.
Yeah. And let's face it, we have a kid playing overseas right now, and he may play 4 or 5 years, but I keep reminding him to make sure that you got everything else tied up, because he's still going to have to work, you know. You can't play professionally forever. And so, like, you're exactly right. Like, if you're not giving them the life skills, then you're probably not the right person to coach that individual. Like, I think, you know, so many coaches, or not enough coaches, stick with their guys well after they're done playing. And I think that's a really important attribute to have.
Well, the message I tell a lot of young prospects at camps and also events is, A, go where you're wanted, go where you're needed. And at the end of the day, no matter how good you are, people like to play. And, you know what, at the end of the day, you look at some of these players that may go to a Division I layer or a higher level, and they're not playing, they're sitting into the bench, they're not happy, where those same players can go play at a lower level. But you know what? Enjoy their 4 years. They got a chance to play, get a great education, and get a great experience in return.
Yeah, and I can give you a million examples of that. I mean, you remember Lee Meyer Goldwire?
Right.
You know, I think he was Player of the Year in Florida, and could have went to probably Florida State or some bigger school, and he chose Charlotte, which might have been considered a mid-major plus at the time. But look at how productive he was in life. And he played 14 years or 15 years overseas, and doing a bunch of stuff, investing in kids now. And like, that was a very mature decision. And I think sometimes people just need to do that step back and make a mature decision versus just the knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I want to say thank you for coming on Coach's Corner today. Like I said, you've done a great job at Catawba, and you're playing in one of the toughest D2 conferences in the country. And we want to wish you good luck, and thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Thank you, Coach.
Bye-bye.